Hey, what's up guys, it's Matt with the Movement System. In this video, we're going to talk about max velocity sprinting and the science and the training techniques involved in improving the velocity that you can sprint at. A lot of people make mistakes in improving max velocity sprinting, and they're doing a lot of training that's not resulting in actual improvements in max velocity speed. So what we're going to talk about is the 3 principles of max velocity sprint training. Let's go ahead and get started. Alright, the first principle that we're going to talk about here is rate of force development. So this graph is really important to understand. If we're doing, for example, a 1 rep max back squat, that might take 3 seconds on the concentric. That would be an exercise that's emphasizing max force and would be at the very high end of this rate of force development graph. By contrast, max velocity sprinting involves very, very short ground contact times. The ground contact time of an elite sprinter at max velocity is less than 1/10 of a second. So on the bottom you'll see about 0.1 seconds. We're really limited in the amount of force that we can produce here. This means that for sprinting at max velocity, it doesn't matter which athlete has the highest peak to this graph or the most force development. It actually matters which athlete has the greatest slope at the start of this graph and which athlete can produce the most force in a very limited time constraint. And this leads us to our training principle of if we want to improve max velocity sprinting, we need to improve the slope of this graph or improve our rate of force development. Different exercises fall on different portions of this graph. At the top of the graph, we have 1 rep max, 3 rep max, 5 rep max type training, which is slow and grinding, and it even goes beyond half a second. Towards the middle of the graph, in that 0.2 to 0.3 seconds, we have a lot of agility work, change of direction drills, even a vertical jump is around that 0.2 to 0.3 seconds. We would consider that range of 0.2 to 0.3 seconds the slow stretch shortening cycle. This classification of slow and fast stretch shortening cycle comes from the work of Eamon Flanagan and his work on reactive strength index. Basically, he makes the distinction between activities that occur in greater than 0.25 seconds of ground contact time and activities that occur with shorter than 0.25 seconds of ground contact time. So some of our plyometrics that would occur with greater than 0.25 seconds of ground contact time would be things like a vertical jump, a change of direction drill, the acceleration phase of sprinting, deceleration work. A lot of these exercises are still good to do as base adaptations for sprinters, but they're not going to directly impact the mechanics at max velocity. By contrast, exercises of the fast stretch shortening cycle, like repeated hops, depth jumps, power skips, and downhill sprinting with a 1, 2, 3% grade, are all activities that occur with that short ground contact time less than 0.25 seconds. Those exercises capitalize on the specific neurophysiological pathways that we utilize during max velocity sprinting. So if we're training those specific pathways, we're going to get specific adaptations to the muscle spindle response and the muscular pathways and the motor unit recruitment that's involved with max velocity sprinting, and we will probably see more carryover to performance. So our first principle is making sure that we are specifically training the fast stretch shortening cycle to improve the rate of force development under the constraints of a very short ground contact time. Important note though, we're not going to be doing that year round. If you're already doing depth jumps and power skips and very fast movements, and you've been doing that for months and you're not seeing progress, chances are you've plateaued and you may need to try a block with more base adaptations. So our base adaptations would be things like maximal strength. While it's not exactly what we utilize in the sprint, having a higher base of max strength will allow our plyometric training to be more effective. And that base block of training may even include hypertrophy work, because again, if we can improve hypertrophy of specific muscle groups involved in max velocity sprinting, like the hamstrings, the calves, the hip flexors, the quads, we're going to improve the mechanics of our sprint, which is where we're going next here with principle number 2. Principle number 2 is improving our muscular coordination and our technique. There are specific training principles involved in improving intra and intermuscular coordination involved in max velocity sprinting. Some general exercises that we can do to improve our technique would be things like A skips, B skips, and marching, as well as hopping drills. All of these drills that are designed to replicate specific parts of the gait cycle can improve your mechanics in the sprint. It's probably a good idea to include these in your sprint warm-up to warm up the body and to improve your mechanics over time. We can also work to train specific deficits that we see in an individual athlete's sprint technique. If we see that an athlete is overstriding, we can specifically do training to prevent that. We can also correct if an athlete is wasting energy by swinging their arms across the midline, or if they're pawing the ground excessively and not producing a lot of vertical force. There are a lot of skipping variations and other technique drills that you can learn to improve on these mechanics. And if you want to learn more about max velocity sprint mechanics, I do have an entire video on that you can check out. I'll link it in the description below. And then the third principle that we want to discuss here is energy system training. Specifically, to improve our max velocity sprint, we need to improve the ATP-PC cycle. This is an alactic energy system, meaning that it's so fast that it's not even considered anaerobic. As we get greater than 60 to 100 meters, we start to get a combination of this alactic power production and the anaerobic energy systems. To improve those energy systems, we need to train those energy systems. This means that we don't need our sprinters to be running a mile and improving their aerobic system. As a base for sprinting, we really only want to go about one energy system above what their competition is. So if an athlete's going to be competing in events that require max velocity sprinting, such as the 100 meter, their base training may be 200 meter or 400 meter type run distances. And improving that base of anaerobic capacity will actually help them. It may not improve the physical force demand during max velocity sprinting, but it will improve their ability to train with more repetitions. Instead of burning out after 4 or 5 sets of a 100-meter sprint, they may be able to tolerate and recover from 6 to 8 sets, which will then make their training more effective and allow them to produce better results whenever they get closer to the season. Let me know in the comments below what exercises you like to train to improve your max velocity sprinting, whether that be plyometrics, power, strength work, whatever it is that you like. Go ahead and drop it in the comments below, and hopefully we can learn from each other's exercises. If you guys are interested in learning about the acceleration phase of sprinting, let me know in the comments below, and I might make a video on that and talk about overspeed training and hill repeats and how training with long ground contact times can actually improve your acceleration phase. Make sure you like the video, subscribe so you don't miss any future videos, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Thanks.